Welcome to another episode of Thorn's Jungle, but before we get into it, I have my Patreon up and running. So if you want extra episodes that are exclusive only to Patreon and also bonus content, then subscribe to it. There's a few different tiers, but for as little as $5 a month, you can get one extra episode a week, which is exclusive only to Patreon, so only you can see it. You'll also get bonus questions for the Ultimate Animal Quiz. We do like 5 or 6 extra questions and answers, so it's pretty much like a whole other extra mini episode of the Ultimate Animal Quiz. So yeah, get onto that, support the show, and get extra bonus content. There's all sorts of goodies on there. Today's episode is going to be something a little different, but not super different. It's a cryptid episode. So cryptozoology, for those that don't know, things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Yeti, they're all cryptids. Cryptozoology means the study of hidden animals. And as I've always said, there are certain cryptids that I've always hold in higher regard and in higher possibility of existing. There are some that are just so outrageous where it's like, nah, that thing doesn't exist. But today's episode is on the Almasty, which is also called the Almas. And it's basically the Bigfoot of the Caucasus mountain area. So mostly in Russia is where most of the sightings of this cryptid come from. And today I'm going to be reading It was a study that was done quite a few years ago. Let me just see. Well, 2015 by a Marie Jean Kaufman. So she went out to the foothills of this mountain in Russia, Mount Elbrus in Russia, and basically interviewed a bunch of the farmers and villagers that live in that area to get more information about the Almasty. Now, this report that I'm reading from, it's super detailed. It's like, how many pages is it? 27 pages. And it goes into, things like how the Soviets were looking into the Almasty, things like that. But what I'm going to read to you today is like very detailed eyewitness accounts of the Almasty. She went out and she got so much information about this creature. And you know what? A few years back, if you would ask me if the Almasty existed, I probably would have said, nah, probably not. But I remember reading this report a few years back, and I was like in bed reading it just on my phone, and I couldn't put it down. I was like, this is crazy. And you will notice some of the similarities between each witness report, each witness's account, and that sort of lends to more, credence and high level of evidence that this creature is an actual creature that exists. You'll notice some of the similarities in the description are things like the vocalizations. They all describe very similar vocalizations. Just the descriptions are very similar. The way they do things with their facial expressions in each different account are very similar. Even small details that these people, why would you make up? Things like their feet and their toes being splayed apart, which is what our feet naturally should look like if it wasn't for the invention of footwear like shoes and high heels. Our toes would be very spaced apart. And if you see some tribes in Africa, South America, Indonesia, things like that, where they never really wear footwear, their toes are very spaced apart. So that's like another detail that just sort of lends credence to these eyewitness accounts. So this episode's basically going to be me reading these eyewitness accounts, and it's super fascinating. I hope you find it fascinating. So sit back and listen to some of these stories because they are absolutely incredible. It's going to be like basically your own little audio book with me narrating, but they're bloody really cool, really cool. The first one is titled Three Almasties Hiding Under a Rock. This was from an eyewitness called, and look, again, my pronunciation of these names are going to be butchered, Komyechev Talib. I'm just going to say Talib. She was a 67-year-old Kabardian, one of the most respected elders in the village. And this is her eyewitness account of an Almasty. She says, it was probably in 1930 or 1931, in June or at the end of May, when our cattle left for alpine pastures of Elbruz, which is that mountain. I was chief of the group. We had left to inspect the herds with a veterinarian. Well, rain had surprised one of my shepherds, Chaghir, very high up on the slopes, and he had gone to take refuge under a rocky overhang. When he approached it, there were 3 Almasties sitting under it. Chaghir was a little frightened, but as the rain was then falling much harder, he decided to stay there anyway, except staying at a distance from the Almasties. They looked at one another, and then the rain stopped and Chaghir came down to the farm. He did not say anything to anyone. Very early in the morning, I was awakened by cries, a tremendous noise, and I saw that the shepherds were running to assemble their herds and were taking the cattle down the valley. Why are they leaving? I asked. There are Almasties under the rock, said Chaghir. Up there. At that moment, Chaghir declared, it's true. And there were 3 Almasties sitting up there. I saw them yesterday evening. I was really angry, this woman said. I said to Chaghir, you're an idiot. You were frightened by a bush. No, said Chaghir, I saw them. Well, why didn't you tell anyone? The woman said. Because the old people have warned, when you see an Almasty for the first time, if you tell anyone about it, you will get a bad headache. Well, for me, it was the first time I'd seen one, he said. I continued not to believe this. They said to me, okay, go ahead and see for yourself. So this is Chaghir, what him and the herders are saying to this lady. So she got together about 10 or 15 people and made half a circle around the rock. She says, we stayed there until dinner time. Some went away and others came back, meaning some of the shepherds. The 3 Almasty were seated under the overhang, 2 of medium size and the other one was bigger. The one that was the biggest was in the middle. They were sitting on rocks facing us, hunched over with their heads down. From time to time, they raised their heads slightly and looked at us from under their brows. Their heads were very ugly, not nice at all. They resemble a human face a little, but the nose is shorter and flattened. The eyes are slanted and reddish. Their cheeks are very prominent, like those of a Mongol or a Korean, but even more so. The lips are thin, and the lower jaw is receding, as though cut on a bias. Their hair is long, like that of a woman, and tangled. The entire body is covered with shaggy hair resembling that of a buffalo. In some places, this is long, on the torso and chest, and in other places it is shorter, like the arms and legs. The big one had the chest of a man. The others had breasts of a woman, but were extremely long and covered with hair. The hair was very dirty. The stink was so strong that we could not stand it. The odor resembled that of wild flax when it grows thickly. Once, the seated one on the right mumbled something. I did not see their hands clearly as they were held between their legs. The legs are rather short and bowed. The foot is like that of a man, but more spread out. That's them splayed toes. All were wearing, wrapped around their waists, an old piece of shepherd's cape. A young shepherd proposed to throw a lasso around one of them and bring it into the village, but all of the other herders cried out that that is forbidden, that they must not be harmed, and that they must not be disturbed. I watched them from a distance of about 3 to 4 meters. and I even approached to within about a meter. Did I touch them? I should not. If you touch them, as Allah be my witness, you could no longer eat with your hand afterwards. They would be so dirty, stinking, and repulsive. I remained for about 2 hours. When I left, other shepherds were arriving. I have heard my father recount that they suckle on cows. So, that's her eyewitness report. And if you notice, little things like, yes, the splayed out toes, and also the very thin lips and receding jaw. Now, human beings are the only hominin, so human and human ancestors, that have a chin bone. Neanderthals, Homo erectus, Paranthropus, Homo habilis, all those hominins, relic hominins, didn't have chin bones. They had very backwards and slanted chins, which is pretty crazy. For this woman to know that would be kind of remarkable. So that's a pretty cool eyewitness. That's the first one. We then go on to a story told by Urjib, who was 70 years old. Before the war, there were many Almasties around our area, even masses of them, one can say. Today, evidently, very few are encountered. I am somewhat informed about Almasties because I've heard a great deal spoken about them. Personally, I have seen them 3 times. The first time was in October 1944. Our detachment of police was on horseback, so this person was obviously a police officer. Crossing a field of hemp on the steppe, suddenly the horse of the man in front of me stopped so abruptly that I almost ran into him. I was riding second in line. He said to me, "Look, an Almasty." Just in front of us, a few meters away, an Almasty was stuffing into its mouth the ends of stalks of hemp with the grain on them. Behind us, the detachment was gathering around and making some noise. The Almasty saw us and ran away very rapidly. It ran extraordinarily fast towards the shepherd's cabin, which was not far away. While it was running, several men of our detachment took their rifles from their shoulders and prepared to fire, but our chief, a Russian officer, cried out, don't shoot, let's capture it alive and take it to Nauchik." We dismounted and surrounded the shepherd's cabin. We were quite numerous, and were able to form a solid circle around the cabin. It was just opposite the door, and I saw everything. When we approached the Almasty, it came out of the cabin 2 or 3 times in one bound. It appeared very agitated. It came out, moved around, jumped to one side, but then saw the men and went back in. Again, it came out, leaped around, right, left, jumped back to the other side, and then saw the men again. In doing this, it grimaced with its lips moving very, very fast, and it mumbled something. Meanwhile, our cordon was approaching. We had closed ranks and were advancing elbow to elbow. At this moment, the Almasty appeared again, jumped in all directions, and suddenly gave a terrible cry and ran straight at the men. It ran faster than a horse. To tell the truth, the men were taken by surprise. It easily broke through our cordon, jumped into the ravine, and disappeared into the brush surrounding the river. It was about 1.8 meters in height, so about 5'11", and very robust. One could not see its face well because of the hair. Its breast hung down to its middle. It was covered with long shaggy red hair like that of the buffalo. The hair could be seen clearly through the pieces of the old handmade Kabardian kaftan which it was wearing, and it was completely in tatters. One must look for Almasties at night near the fields of hemp when it's ripe. They love hemp. They eat a great deal of it, walking around the fields and stuffing themselves with clusters of the grain. While doing this, they mumble all the time. Boom, boom, boom. They chew noisily and blow from their noses, and they rustle the stalks. When an Almasty is eating hemp, it can be heard at a great distance at night. How many times in the past I've heard them mumbling this way? In recent years, I've never heard them anymore. Almasties are much also like watermelons. In the past, they came into the plantation and did a great deal of damage. I have a friend, an old man. He was a guardian of a melon field in the collective farm and lived there in a hut. It was before the war. One day I went to see him and noticed that many of the melons had been damaged. They had been chewed on in a strange way. They were eaten in the middle, I picked one up and saw marks of very large teeth. I then understood that it was an Almasty which had done this. I arrived at my friend's shack. I laughed and said, "You're a fine guardian. Look at your plantation. Look what has happened to it." He answered me, "Be quiet. This Almasty takes all my strength. Every night it comes out and eats the watermelons. I go out to meet it with my stick, but I don't dare come too close. I shout at it, 'Are you ashamed? Go away.' It says to me, 'Boom, boom, boom.' I shout again, 'You have no conscience. Me, I'm the guardian here. I'm responsible for the watermelons.' It answers me, 'Boom, boom, boom.' And then we chat like this all night. Do you know of, and this is this, so this now is the interviewer asking this person a question. Do you know of any cases where Almasty have been killed or a carcass has been found? And this eyewitness replies, 30 or 40 years ago, 2 shepherds came and told how they had found in a forest a very recently dead carcass of an Almasty, devoured by wolves or dogs. In fact, there was not even a carcass anymore, as it was only the head that remained. The shepherds were very upset. They kept repeating, 'That will bring us a lot of trouble. That will bring us a lot of trouble.' And she also asks this eyewitness, 'Why do certain Almasties wear human clothing?' The person replies, 'First of all, our people take pity on Almasties. Earlier, it happened very often that Almasties came to our houses for us to give them something to eat. At the time, they would be given some clothing that they would not be cold. Secondly, the Almasties take things themselves. That happens very often. In former time, let's say someone goes into the forest or the fields to collect wood or cut hay. He hangs his food and some of his clothing on a branch or somewhere in order not to be too warm. He comes back a few hours later, his food has been eaten and his clothing has disappeared. The Almasties have stolen everything. The Almasties watch man very closely. For example, a man is walking in the forest, it's hot, he sees a river. He undresses, puts his things on the bank and goes in swimming. Then he comes out, dresses, and goes on his way. Immediately, as soon as he has left, at the very same moment, out of the forest comes the Almasty. That is clearly, if there had been some nearby. Necessarily, it will come to the place where the clothing had been put down. It will feel the ground and sniff at will. The Almasties are very curious. So that's another pretty damn fascinating eyewitness account. This next one is by Fietza. It's a 67-year-old. I have seen in good many... So, I'll just say, these people are old. They probably don't speak English that well. This is the translations of them. So it's worded a little bit strange. I'm trying my best to, on the fly, change the wording a little bit so it makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, it's very old wording and things like that. So I have seen a good many Almasties. How many times? I can tell you that I saw them all of the time. During 5 years in summer when I was in the mountain pastures. It was in the 1930s, in the direction of the Elbrus, in a rocky area where there were caverns. There were many Almasties in this region. They went in and out of the caverns like bees in a hive, high above us. But I never saw more than one at a time. They were of different ages, little ones, big ones. I believe they were more women than men. In the men, the pouches were placed further back, as with the wild boar. So I guess they mean his testicles were placed further back. I never saw very little ones or newborn ones, but I often heard them crying. The old people say that the women find a way to attach them to their breasts. The Almasties are like people. They have arms and legs like people, except they are covered with hair. Their hair is like that of a bear and dark. I always saw them without clothing. I never saw them wearing clothing. They do not know how to speak. They only mumble or bellow. They are not afraid of people, only dogs. They run very fast. They always come very early in the morning or at sunset because they are afraid of the dogs, in order to lick pieces of rock salt near our shelter. I often saw them do this, almost every day. They came when the sheep were not there and when the dogs had gone to sleep. Twice during this time I saw them quite close. One day I was coming back from the village. It was very far. I had a small bag with food, cheese, bread, and a piece of mutton. Towards evening, it began to rain very hard. I went into a cabin, made a wood fire, and spread out my woolen cape. At night, the rain fell even harder. All at once, something entered the cabin. It was very big, covered with reddish fur, and walking on two legs. For a moment I thought it was a bear, and then no, I saw it was an Almasty. I was very frightened. I was not armed, and only had my dagger. I was seated sideways to it and pretended not to see anything. But I was more dead than alive. I don't know what that means. I had my dagger on my right hand, hidden on my chest, so that it could not see it in order to make it angry, to not make it angry. Then I calmed down a bit, remembering that the old people always say that if one does not do it any harm, it never touches man. Nevertheless, the Almasty sat down near the fire at one side and began to squeeze water out of its fur, for it was soaked. It did this like this, and so the eyewitness, gestures, takes a lock of hair in two hands and pulls it downwards, and the hair was dried by the pressure of, sliding his hand. So basically just wringing out its fur. Then it sat down close to the fire, turning first one side and then to the other side of the fire. Finally, it was leaning almost against my feet. I moved aside a little, very carefully, but it leaned against my feet again. In this way, little by little, it pushed me away from the fire. I was completely reassured because I could see that it was not dangerous. Moreover, it was a woman. She had very long breasts which hung down across her abdomen. I said several words to it, and then I tried to talk to it in Carbadian, also in Balkar, and then in Russian, but it only mumbled incomprehensible sounds. I began to get sleepy, as it was already very late, but I did not dare to sleep. Finally, I finished by dozing, lying on my left side. During the night, I very clearly heard it biting and chewing. I thought, good God, my foot! But I didn't say anything. I heard it sucking on the bones. I don't know, sucking on what bones? Must have been, okay. In the morning I awoke very early and saw that it was no longer there. My bag had been opened and empty. It had eaten everything. The wretched creature had left nothing for me. The bones from the mutton were carefully lined up beside the bag. The other time it happened this way, I had left with 2 donkeys to try and make my luck at hunting, staying in a cabin of neighbouring Balkars who were absent. It was in the brush, not far from our sheepfold. Our 4 dogs, big Caucasian sheepdogs, had followed me. It was toward evening when we approached the dogs. The dogs suddenly ran forward and began to run around the cabin, barking. I said to myself, there is something in the cabin. I came to the door and opened it carefully. In the middle of the cabin, an Almasty was standing. I stayed in the door, and the Almasty looked at me, its lips moving very fast. It should have stayed there, as I would never have allowed the dogs to do it any harm. But it was probably very frightened. Suddenly, it jumped towards the door and escaped, hitting me on the left shoulder as it did so. I almost fell. For a month my shoulder was sore. It ran on 2 legs very fast, and crying in a very shrill and loud voice, like a woman. I tried to hold back the dogs. I yelled and called. But you can imagine, the dogs came back 2 or 3 times. The dogs came back 2 or 3 hours later, tired out, muzzles and paws bloody, and yet without a scratch to them. So they must have torn the thing to pieces. Dogs cannot stand them, the Almasties. So, it's pretty bad, poor bloody Almasty, torn to shreds by giant dogs. The interviewer asks this eyewitness, what does it eat, the Almasty? And the eyewitness says, it eats the afterbirth of cattle, dead horses, and carrion. It goes to the places where man relieves himself. They are hellbore. I have often heard people say this, and I have seen for myself that they can eat a great deal of it, so they eat shit, essentially, sometimes. The next eyewitness sighting. The occupant of a vegetable garden. This is a 44-year-old man, Muhammad. It was 1939 or 1940 in summer where she came from. I do not know. But one day a female Almasty appeared in our vegetable garden and settled in the corn section. She made a nest with old rags and grass. She passed a week with us without leaving the vegetable garden. She ate green corn. She was entirely covered with fur. Her hair was very long, the breasts elongated and hung like on a woman but very low down. The nails were long, the eyes were slanted and red, the teeth were larger than in a man, and the lips were the lips of a monkey. During the day, she always remained lying down. In general, she laid on her side, but she turned all of the time and never stayed in the same position for long. Many people came to us to see her. If several people approached at the same time, she began nervous, sat up, cried, stood up, and pulled on her hair. She cried in a very loud... She cried in a very... In a very... What? Where did that go? She cried in a very loud voice like a woman. When she was calm, if there was someone near her, she would come up slowly and began to lick the person like a dog. If you left her, your shirt sleeve was all wet. She would lick your entire shoulder. Phew, damn, she was keen. This next eyewitness report comes from Karkanov Daniel, 65 years old. When I worked as a shepherd in the, good grief, Akbekkanayoko Valley, at the same sheepfold where you were this morning, I saw Almasties all the time. It was in the 1940s. One evening at the end of October, we were cooking meat. At this moment, the sheep scattered. We went running around to get them back together. When we came back an hour later, no more cooking pot. It was a pot of some 15 litres. What do we think? We didn't think anything. We didn't have to think. We knew without thinking that it had been done by Almasties. Not far from us there was an old cabin. Almasties lived there. How many? The interviewer asked. I don't know. Probably a whole family. 6 or 7. We heard them stirring around and making noises every day towards evening. They were agitated. They beat one another. They played. They are very noisy people. They squeal, they shout, they cry. They do not have a human language. Rather, they speak like a drum. Boom, boom, boom. Hey, no, that's interesting. None of us ever went in that house. One day I offered a sheep to anyone who would, but no one accepted. They, on the other hand, came into our sheepfold and took leftover food. One day, they pulled into their house a rain pipe which had been laying outside. All night they played with this pipe. They beat on it. They didn't let us sleep at all that night. We were 5 men, married men with rifles, but we were afraid to go see what they were doing. As for the cooking pot, it was found in the morning, empty of course, not far away, between the stream and their house. I worked for 3 years in that place. They were there all the time, especially in the summer. Our dogs became accustomed to them. They growled but didn't touch them. However, if the dogs surrounded one, the Almasty began to cry very loudly. I often saw their tracks, 5 toes, no plantar arch, round heel, wide sole. Their print resembles that somewhat of a bear. I've not returned there since 1947. So that boom 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 noise that they make, boom boom boom, boom boom boom. I can't do it, but we have emus in Australia make similar noises. It's almost like they're beatboxing. Boom boom boom. Pretty interesting. Seems to be a pretty common description of the way they sound and the noises they make. And even with that foot description, seeing the footprints, so no arch in the foot, flat-footed, wide toes. Man, pretty interesting. This next eyewitness report comes from Dina, 40 years old, an electrician. In the summer of 1950, I was sent to make an inventory of the farms in the mountain pastures of Elbrus. That's the mountain. Toward midnight, we went to lay down. The shelter had 3 walls of stone. There was no 4th wall. It was open on that side. Everyone lay down on the ground, on hay, under our woolen capes. Heads toward the interior wall, feet towards the exterior. I was laying at the edge. Between the side wall and me, there was a space where the soup pot and the frying pan full of grilled meat had been stored. Everyone fell asleep quickly. Me, I was young, a little excited by the conversation, the meal, and the unusual surroundings. It was the first time I was sleeping in the mountains, and I did not go to sleep. My neighbour, an old man, wasn't sleeping either. From time to time he would doze off, then wake up, have a smoke, and fall back asleep again. All of a sudden, a sort of woman entered the shelter, rapidly and silently. She was hideous, with long hair down to her waist. She looked at the wall where the bridle was hanging, a Caucasian bridle decorated with metallic pendants. She took down the bridle, turned it over and over again, examined it from all sides, and then hung it up on the wall again and went out quietly. I was petrified with fear. At that moment, the old man was not sleeping. I asked him, "What was that?" He answered me calmly, "It's nothing. Pay no attention to it. If you stay here, you will see lots of things like that." And then he went back to sleep. All at once, she reappeared, stopped, stood motionlessly, examined very carefully the sleeping man. She rapidly approached the saucepans and found herself 1 or 2 meters from me. The pot was covered with its lid, as is our custom. The frying pan was covered with another frying pan. She stooped down, took the cover off the frying pan quickly and quietly, and began to eat. She ate at random, at times the meat from the frying pan, at times the soup. She dipped into the soup with the big wooden ladle which she had taken from the cover. She did not hold it as people would, but with all 5 fingers on the one side. Her fingers were very long except for the thumb, which was shorter than a man's. Her appearance was hideous, not attractive at all. She was completely hairy, with dark reddish-brown fur covering her entire body. Long breasts extended down to the abdomen. The hair was loose, long, and tangled. The nose was small, not turned up, as this man said, but flat. The mouth stretched very wide, much more than ours, and the lips were thin, as in a monkey's. The skin was black, the cheeks were prominent, as in Chinese or Koreans. However, there are Chinese and Chinese. Some have more prominent cheeks than others. Others have less. As for her, she had very prominent ones, like the true, authentic Chinese. The eyes slanted sharply as the colour was like this. And their colour was like this. He must have showed her a colour or something. If place of the eyes, one would put little bulbs from a pocket lamp and then placed a red glass in front of them. Well, that would be exactly like her eyes. She was wearing a sort of dress, all torn and disgusting. She ate very quickly, seated on her heels, grabbing now the meat and now the soup, with very rapid movements. She chewed very quickly. In fact, I don't even know if she did chew, or swallowed, or just swallowed directly. But she devoted close attention to eating, without stopping for a second to look to the right or to the left. What struck me was the speed, the precision, and the silence of her movements. In my word of honour, if I began to eat, I would certainly have made some noise. I would have knocked against something. As for her, she did everything in complete silence, just like in a silent film at the cinema. For example, when she took the bridle had national ornaments in metal, and they should necessarily have jingled together. Well, she took it down, turned it around, and hung it back up without the slightest sound. She then had finished eating, and put the lid back on the pot, quickly and silently. She closed the frying pan with the other frying pan. She put the wooden ladle back on the cover, at exactly the place where she had found it, and she left. If I had been alone, I probably would have died of fright. But although I was afraid, I felt calm, because there were a lot of people around. I said to myself, if something happens, I shall start to shout and they will all get up. I was not able to go back to sleep for a long time. In the morning, everyone began to eat the meat and soup, and to offer it to me, I declined. I had seen what had been eating it during the night. I said I was not accustomed to eat in the morning. So, it's actually pretty funny, like, thinking about these super hairy, basically half ape, half man looking people wearing like dresses that they'd stolen from people. Like, it's pretty funny, but it does make sense, you know, these people, and I call them people because I'm assuming that they are some form of relic hominin. They're definitely a hominin, so they would probably be in the Homo genus, which makes them a human of some sort. Um, but it's just funny that they're stealing things and wearing it. Okay, this next eyewitness account is from Khamid, 46 years old. At the end of September in 1939, I was following the road from Nazini Korkozunihin to Mulka. I decided to cut across the immense field of corn. I had hardly left the road, about 40 metres away from it, when I fell on the remains of an Almasty which had been devoured by dogs or wolves. Over a space of about 12 metres in diameter, everything had been trampled down. The corn was beaten down and destroyed. In the middle of this area lay the head of an Almasty, with what remained of the neck. The left half of the neck had been devoured. Until that day I did not believe in the existence of Almasties. I laughed and claimed they were fables and inventions. That is why I proceeded to examine the head with particular interest. Armed with a stick, I turned it over on all sides, and sitting on my heels I examined it closely. The head was enveloped in a whole mane of very long hair, which in the living state probably would have reached the waist. The hair was very tangled and matted with thistles. This mane was so thick that when I turned the head, it remained in the air, as on a cushion. That is why I was not able to discern the form of the skull. However, its dimensions were those of a human skull. The forehead was receding and sloped. This spot is very prominent. He points to the eyebrows. So obviously had a big brow ridge. The nose is small and turned up. It had no root and was as if it was pushed into the face. It was the nose of a monkey. The cheeks were prominent like that of a Chinese. Man, they're really getting into these Chinese. The lips were not those of a man, rather they were thin and straight as in a monkey's. I did not see the teeth, as the lips were pressed firmly together. The chin was not as in a man, but was rounded. The ears were human, one was torn, the other intact. The eyes were strongly slanted, with the apertures directed downward and outward. I did not know the colour of the eyes. The eyelids were closed, and I did not raise them. The skin was black and covered with dark reddish-brown hair. The hair was absent around the eyes and on the upper parts of the cheeks. The cheeks themselves and the ears were covered in short hair. The neck and chin, the hair was longer. The head gave off a powerful and repulsive odour. It was not the odour of decomposition. The remains were fresh and did not smell of anything. There were no flies or worms. It was the odour of the Almasty itself, so sickening that I nearly vomited. I also examined the head, holding my nostrils shut with my left hand while I manoeuvred the stick with my right. The odour resembled that of an old filth or old dirty body or mould. Nearby were scattered other parts of the body. I saw whitish bones covered with fragments of flesh. I did not go near them. So the interviewer asks, does the face of the Almasty resemble more that of a man or a monkey? He answers, it's very difficult to answer you. The nose and lips are exactly those of a monkey, but plainly taken all together, the face resembles that of a man. We showed the interviewer shows the eyewitness a portrait of a Pithecanthropus, which is like a very early hominin, very early, even earlier than like Homo erectus. And the eyewitness said, and he noted a certain amount of resemblance between its nose and that of the Almasty. He pointed to the chin. He repeated several times, exactly like that. The mouth also bore a certain resemblance. The eyes of their apertures were totally different. Overall, aside from the lower part of the face, he found no general similarity to the Almasty. So from the, I guess the eyes down, um, he said it looks like the uh, Pithecanthropus, but the eyes up, not really. Okay, next eyewitness report. How fascinating are these? Like, this is insane to me. Reading this is absolutely insane. You need to understand that these are just farmers, villagers, people that live in remote places that are giving these eyewitness reports. This lady that's doing these reports went out and sought out people like this. No, none of these people came to her or anything like that to give their reports, so they're not getting anything out of this. So just keep that in mind. The next one, a birth in an Almasty family. So this is from a 55-year-old farmer. A month ago, on the 10th of August, wow, this is a pretty recent one. On the 10th of August in 1964, about 3 kilometers from the village, I was scything in a field of sunflowers where there remained some open places where seeds had not been sown. Suddenly, I heard a strong noise, as if somebody were blowing noisily, like a dog, when a fly gets near their nose. When the sound occurred a third time, I put down my scythe and went to look. Suddenly, 2 arms, like human ones, but long, black and hairy, extended from the foliage in my direction. I ran immediately to my cart and climbed up on it. It had been unhitched about 10 meters away. Standing on the cart, I saw a silhouette resembling a human one, which was bent over and was pushing into the sunflowers. I only saw clearly the back, which was covered with long reddish fur like that of a buffalo, and the long hair of the head. I did not see its face. When the Almasty left, I recognized it at once, because formerly I had seen others. I came down from my cart and returned to my scythe. At that moment, I heard a squealing at the same place. I advanced carefully and pushed the stalks apart. On the packed down grass, as in a nest, were lying 2 newborns. One was clear that she had just given birth. It was clear that she had just given birth. They were exactly like human babies, except they were smaller. They must have weighed around 2 kilos, no more. Apart from that, you would not have been able to distinguish them from our little ones. They had rosy skin, like human infants, exactly the same head, the same arms and legs. They were not hairy. No, I stress this, they were not hairy. They looked like newborn humans, or newborn rats. That's a weird thing to say. They looked exactly like newborn humans or newborn rats. What are you trying to say? Oh, he's saying because they were bare and rosy skin. They were waving their little arms and legs just like our newborns and squealing. I got away from there in a hurry. I quickly hitched up my donkey and returned to the village. 2 or 3 days later I came back, but there was no one around. The interviewer asks, "Why did you not tell anyone about this?" He replies, "What do you mean, not tell anyone? I told my wife and neighbours about it." And she says, "No, I mean, why did you not report it?" And he says, "Report it to who? For what reason?" She says, "To the authorities, to the police, to the Soviet." He says, "The idea of reporting such foolishness to authorities and Almasty giving birth would arouse great hilarity from the small group present." And then she says, "But you didn't know that this is of interest. But you didn't know that this was of interest, that scientists are studying the Almasty?" And he replies, "Who knew that that was important? Never in my life have I heard it said that that could be of any interest to anyone." So pretty much like these people are so used to seeing Almasty, they know that Almasty are there. It's almost like, well, why would we report it? Like, what would be the point? Everyone knows they're here. Like, all right, this next eyewitness report: an Almasty in the bath, and this is told by a Maurat, a 23-year-old chauffeur. In the autumn of 1950, I was walking at night along the edge of Bulacane Chai River. I was carrying a sack of rice which I had pinched. pinched down there at the old mill. It weighed some 20 kilos. Plainly, I did not want to meet anyone. As if intentionally, the moon was shining and shining as brightly as possible. So basically he's stolen a bag of rice. Also, I'd not taken the main street, but rather taken the back alleys of the village along the river. All at once I heard a noisy splashing. I thought at first that the wind was carrying the sound of the rapids, but there was no wind, and also the rapids are quite small. The splashing was repeated regularly, as if someone was emptying a bucket all at once. I said to myself, that must be the neighbour across the way who is taking a bath. The devil take him. What am I going to do to get by? So he's trying to sneak around with this stolen bit of rice, and he's like, God damn it, the bloody neighbour's out there having a bath in the river, and I've got to sneak past him. I came up to the riverbank carefully and looked around from behind a rock. In the moonlight I saw a person, very tall, standing in the water. He was standing up straight and throwing enormous handfuls of water over himself. That's curious, I thought. The neighbour isn't that big. At that moment I saw the long hair on the head. Bah! That's better. I said to myself, it's not the neighbour, it's his wife. Well, I said to myself, I'm going to watch her take a bath. I was a young fellow, a bachelor, not yet married. So in case it was interesting to see a good-looking woman. So he was having a perv. I put down my sack and crept up carefully. I arrived at the water's edge, but just at that point, there were bushes which got in the way, so that one could only see very poorly. I had to retreat. She was just behind a rocky outcropping. I went down on my chest, crawled towards the rock, and raised my head slowly, exactly at the level of the ground right beside her. I almost gave up the ghost right there. In the water was standing a dreadful-looking woman, abominable. It wasn't a face that she had, but a frightful muzzle, and enormous hands, long ones. She was filling them with water and throwing them on her shoulders. On my word of honour, it was half a bucketful half a bucketful she scooped up each time. Then she took her breasts and began to throw them on the water. Now her breasts were enormous, very long, and made a loud slapping sound on the water. Then she started to throw water over herself again. My hair was standing up on my head. I crawled slowly backward and then jumped on my feet and ran across the road to the neighbour, the same one of whom I thought was himself, his wife was bathing. I knocked on his door for quite a long time. Finally he came out. I said to him, "Get your rifle and come quickly. There's a captor," which is their word for a horrible mythological creature, which is taking a bath. Come see. At first he hesitated, and then we left. When we arrived, there was no one in sight. The neighbour helped me carry my rice, and clearly he had to share it with him. Oh, God. This next account is The Incredulous Veterinarian. This is a 37-year-old. And this guy actually was the director of the veterinarian and zoological station of the district of Tlahreta in the Republic of Dagestan. So this is a guy that knows animals, okay? On the 20th of August 1959, I was coming back across the mountain to Antzug. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening. The visibility was very good. I was coming down a small valley where the trees were quite sparse. When I reached the big white rock, I noticed an animal that was moving at the base of it. I thought it was a bear, and I hid behind a bush. I had no arms of any sort on me, so he was unarmed. I had only my bridle and the bag in which I carried the supplies needed for vaccinations. While hiding behind my bush, I began to observe. The animal, which so far as I could see, had been seated. It got up suddenly and started moving in my direction on 2 legs. It was a creature which resembled both a man and a monkey at the same time. Since I was a child, I had heard stories of Almasty, but I did not believe in them. Well, this was one, which I now saw with my own eyes. Its fur was long and black like that of a goat. The neck was virtually non-existent. The head rested directly on the shoulders. Long hair hung down from it. The Almasty approached. It was going not toward me, but to one side. It was a man. The head was long and tapered to a point at the top. In other words, it was conical, or ovoid in form, so I had a cone head. Its long arms hung almost to its knees. It swung them while walking, and they jerked as if they were articulated on bolts. They gave the impression of having been assembled in joints like a child's play toy. At about 200 meters from where I was, this strange creature crossed the path and sat down again. It remained seated for 2 to 3 minutes with its hands touching the ground. It reminded me of an athlete doing warm-up exercises. Then it got up again and went toward a bush on the other side of the crest and disappeared. I did not see it anymore. I abandoned my bush and came calmly back to my horse. What struck me the most, it went up the slope very quickly, taking steps of a meter or even more. A man would not able to go up such a steep slope with such great strides. I thought of a chimpanzee which I had seen at the zoo. The fur of the chimpanzee is shorter, and its head more round. Its arms and legs were also shorter. It must be said, it is true, that the chimpanzee's size is much smaller. The Almasty measured about 1.8 meters and resembled more a man than a monkey. It walked erect with just its head inclined, a little forward from the shoulders. There was no tail. Another typical thing, with wolves and bear, one always sees the ears, even if they have short ones. Whereas here, the hair covered the ears and were not that visible. Clearly, I was afraid, but my curiosity was even stronger than my fear. I've lived 37 years and I'd always thought of the Almasty was the invention of superstitious people. Now I know that to be false. I saw it myself. That's a pretty reliable source there. Next eyewitness account. Abdul, 61. My neighbour, an old shepherd of 90 years with tremendous experience, had this adventure. In 1955, in the autumn, just as they did each year, the shepherds of the village led their flocks of sheep across the mountains towards the winter pastures in Azerbaijan. They had to cross the forest of Sari and stop there for the night. The shepherds killed a goat, made a wood fire, and began to prepare supper. Toward midnight, while they were getting ready to eat, they heard a very loud breathing and saw a creature of human appearance, covered with black fur. Its appearance had not produced any panic in the sheep. The shepherds were afraid. "It's an Alnub," said Musa. I guess these are colloquial terms for the Almasty, sort of regional terms. Probably it's hungry and wants us to give it something to eat. Taking some bread and a piece of meat which was cooking on the grill, he threw them to the Almasty. The Almasty leapt upon the food avidly and devoured it rapidly. Then, after remaining there for a little while, it backed away and disappeared into the darkness. Its eyes were shining like those of a cat. Fearing an attack by this being, which the shepherds, who were all Lasges, knew little or not at all, they climbed up into the trees with their rifles. Indeed, at the end of about an hour and a half, the Almasty reappeared and tried to gather up the meat. At the moment, Musa fired. A terrible howling was heard. The Almasty dropped the meat and turned inward and turned towards the sound of the detonation. Now, it was the turn of Dowd to fire. The Almasty hurried away limping and disappeared in the forest. At dawn, the shepherds noticed traces of blood on the grass. Musa and Dowd followed the trail, while the third shepherd remained with the sheep. The trail led Musa and Dowd to the Pchar. Don't know what that is. Here on the bank, they found the bloody body of the Almasty. One bullet had struck it in the leg and the other had pierced its chest. It was about 2 meters tall, so that's 6'7". Its head had the shape of an egg. The nose was as though it had been pushed into the face. The chin was very sloped. It had long, tangled hair that hung from its head. The body gave off a strong and very repulsive odor. The shepherds said that no one would believe them, so that it was necessary to collect some clear proof. From the head, they cut off the ears and a handful of hair. From the right hand, they cut off the phalanges. They cut the phalanges off the thumbs and the index finger. When Musa and Dowd returned to their camp, they were already awaited by newly arrived shepherds. As they expected, the new arrivals did not believe them. They were not even convinced by the evident proof. Then Musa and Dowd led them to the riverbank where the body was laying. 3 months later, Musa came back to the village and began to build a house. He placed the ears and hair and the fingers in the foundation as a talisman to preserve them. It was at this moment he showed them to me. So again, this is the dude recounting this guy's story. So the guy that's recounting this story has seen the ears and the cut off fingers and stuff. What's this? Okay. So the next one is a story that was told by an engineer in 1960. So he's written into this person. He's written this story and sent it in. After having read your article, there would be a snowman in the Transcaucasia. I decided to write to you to tell you about an episode which happened to me some years ago. It was in the summer of 1940. We were with my brother, today an employee of the Academy of Arts in Georgia, in the village of blah blah, it doesn't matter, in the district of Lagodeki. We decided one day to go on an outing 3 to 4 kilometers from the village in the plantation of tobacco. A young boy of our family accompanied us. We were already about to return when the child cried out, "Look, look, somebody is watching us from the tree." We stared closely at the tree and discovered there was a man who, with his hand shading his eyes, he was watching in our direction. Nevertheless, he seemed not to have discovered us, and we kept quiet and decided to observe him. Soon, however, we had to change our minds. Indeed, this creature began to jump from one branch to another, upward and downward, and with such rapidity that we decided it was a monkey. Feeling more confident, we approached to within 25 to 30 meters. But then, we were overcome with real fear. It was something frightful, neither man nor monkey. It resembled rather a man of enormous size with long hair covering its entire body. Finally, it hung by its hands from the branch, jumped to the ground from a height of about 4 meters, and disappeared into the brush. Some minutes later, we heard footsteps and the sound of conversation, and 3 men from the neighbouring village made their appearance on the road. Now, the tree where this creature had been was quite close to the road. I must say that we all were really very much afraid. When we got back to the village, we recounted our adventure. Some people laughed, but others shared our sentiments. And the interviewer asked, why did, whatever his name, hang on. No, don't worry about that. That's of no concern. And that's the last of the eyewitness descriptions. There are a few follow-up questions to some of these eyewitness accounts. She says, do you believe that it was the wild man that you saw? Yes, it could have not have been us, like, meaning humans. Hang on, what's going on here? Okay, and now she's got some descriptions that most of the eyewitnesses have reported. They're between 2 meters or 1.8 meters to 2.2 meters. And basically the descriptions of everything all corroborates everyone else's story. The long reddish hair fur or dark fur, the lips, the eyes, the cheekbones, the smell, it's chattering and mumbling, it's boom, boom, boom sounds. It is insane how similar everybody's story is to one another. And these people are villages that are spread all throughout this district, so not even anywhere close to each other. You're talking like almost different countries, they're that far apart. But how insane are all of those descriptions? Like, I was reading it years ago and blown away by it, and only now I just sort of remembered it, that these exist, and it's such a under known report. You know, that 27-page report is so like I randomly stumbled across it. It wasn't reposted by anyone or anything. I randomly came across it, um, and it does look like Russian governments are looking into Almasty, and that is just a few of many sightings. On that report, she said that she gathered eyewitness reports from over 500 people, and they're just the ones that she managed to gather. So the Almasty, back in the day, we're talking back in sort of World War II period, it seems to have been pretty common. And even the eyewitnesses say that over the years it was becoming more and more rare, which it absolutely would. So, what do you make of this after hearing those eyewitness reports? To me, it is like super plausible that the Almasty exists or existed back then. It may be extinct now. But to me, like, it's sounding super like Neanderthalish, or even a relic hominin that hasn't been discovered yet. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Neanderthal, a Homo erectus, Paranthropus. It doesn't necessarily have to be any of those. It could be a different branch of hominin that we just are yet to discover. But there are also like little conspiracy theories that the Russian government knows about them, have known about them, have captured some of them, have the remains of them. As to why they're not making it publicly known, who knows? But there are cases of that happening in the past to where it might throw the common narrative of human evolution into question, or religious things into question, things like that. So who actually knows why they would do that? But it does seem like the Almasty exists or existed. Now, there is a very famous case of an Almasty that was captured and almost raised like a human, even though she was treated like absolute crap. Her name was Zana, and I don't think she was a purebred Almasty. I think she was a half-breed between human and Almasty, but apparently she was like 6'10", crazy strong. They basically used her as a slave, like as a beast of burden, and the men would her at times, and she conceived children, and their children are still alive today. They even exhumed bodies of some of the grandchildren, great grandchildren or something, and did DNA tests on them, and the test came back either inconclusive or of African origin, like a Negrite's African, which wouldn't make sense because she wasn't black. Her skin was dark, but she was covered in hair and stuff, which we know African tribes and things like that, they're not hairy people. In fact, they have very little body hair because it's a used for thermoregulation. If you're out in the Sahara Desert or in a savanna in hot weather, you don't have hair. So there is that mystery behind Zana, and in the future I will do a complete episode on Zana because it's super fascinating. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed those eyewitness accounts. I certainly did. It still fascinates me to this day. I think more work needs to be done on that for sure. But yeah, have a good rest of your week. I'll see you next week for another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Or if you want more episodes, subscribe to the Patreon and you will get extra episodes every week, extra content. Like I said, you'll get video updates, video messages from me. There's a whole range of things. We have a chat, so you can chat to me. You can also give me topics and questions that I will cover on an episode of Thorn's Jungle. I will see you next time. Take care, everyone.